So, what just happened, Guy? Senator Murray delivered a precise, damning 7-minute breakdown of how Rubio has illegally dismantled USAID, impounded congressional funds, left American companies unpaid, allowed food aid to rot, and ignored hundreds of congressional requests. Rubio's response was to deny everything, claim 600 briefings happened, and dodge every specific question with vague non-answers. Murray's closing question to her colleagues said it all. How long are we going to sit here and watch this silently? Let's watch. I'll break it down.
Senator Murray.
Thank you very much, Chair Graham. Senator Schatz, welcome to your new role. I look forward to working with both of you. Secretary Rubio, I am deeply concerned that you have overseen a systemic campaign to dismantle USAID, impound billions of dollars that this committee actually provided, and unilaterally remake the Department of State without the slightest bit of concern that you lack the authority to do that without Congress. It has created chaos, it's caused preventable deaths across the globe, and it has undermined American leadership. As Ranking Member Schatz noted, what you have done is outright illegal, a complete violation of bipartisan appropriation laws, the Impoundment Control Act, and the Anti-Deficiency Act. Within hours of taking office, President Trump halted all foreign aid in flagrant defiance of the law. Now, under your watch, Secretary Rubio, that freeze was implemented with chaos and cruelty. And then you illegally shuttered USAID, placing everyone on leave, halting life-saving work, literally locking people out of the building and out of their devices, even in dangerous corners of our world. You paid people not to work, abandoned our partners across the globe, and chaotically recalled global staff, putting more than 1,600 Americans who served our country abroad in limbo. And when you shut down the USAID payment system, you even refused to pay for services provided before the illegal freeze. You fought all the way to the Supreme Court, against paying for services U.S. businesses already rendered with funding that Congress already provided. And I know you know, Mr. Secretary, but you lost. And I assume you need the reminder because to this day, you have not made all the payments that are required by our nation's highest court. And as a result, American companies continue to lay off American workers. And by the way, you do continue to lose in court, including just yesterday over your move to illegally replace the U.S. Institute of Peace Leadership, and in recent cases over international broadcasting. Now, eventually, Mr. Secretary, you sent Congress notice of your intent to collapse the USAID into state. Only you didn't consult with this committee. That's required by law. It came without justification, also required by law, and it came long after USAID was reduced to rubble. So sadly, disregard for our laws and values, to me, has sort of become a pattern of your tenor, revoking visas when someone writes an op-ed you don't like, or reaching a secret deal to use taxpayer dollars to jail U.S. residents in a notorious foreign prison, no due process, or pointlessly leaving food assistance to rot in storage. Actually, in Dubai, we now have 500 tons of high-energy biscuits that expire in July. They're bought, they're shipped, they're stored, all at taxpayer expense. But you've condemned them to waste, and that is one example of many. Now, another pattern that I'm deeply worried about is transparency. We have pressed you for information. Our staffs have sent you countless emails and briefing requests so we can do our job here. There are hundreds of unanswered requests and no effort to address them. And Mr. Secretary, that's got to change. Even your plan to reorganize the State Department came with no information on the 270 offices you are moving to eliminate, the proposed layoffs, or how USAID would be merged into state. I won't ask you whether impounding billions of dollars is legal. It is not. I won't ask you whether it's efficient to pay people not to work or fire them without determining staffing needs. But, and I won't ask you if cutting 91% of our counter-narcotic and law enforcement programs make us safer, abruptly abandoning agreements with allies makes us stronger, or ceding our global leadership to China makes us more prosperous. Of course not. We know that. We have worked together for years in a bipartisan way to advance U.S. interests and fund those programs. So with respect to my colleagues, how long are we going to sit here and watch this silently? Are we going to roll over as Trump tramples our laws and undermines our U.S. leadership, burns down what we have spent decades building, and let millions of people across our globe suffer and die? Or are we going to stand up, push back, assert our constitutional power of the purse? And to my colleagues on both sides, this is the moment to decide whether this committee continues to be a powerful bipartisan force, a force that I think we've all been proud of for a very long time, a force that is focused on safety and economic strength and national security, focused on leading the world in research and development and countering China and others with our soft power and our military power. Every single member of this committee knows what we are risking by letting this administration tear down so much. On USAID and other programs, we can always talk about how we can make things work better and other reforms. I don't think any of us are opposed to any of those considerations. We have been doing that in a bipartisan way for a long time. But that's not actually what Trump's fiscal year 2026 budget proposes. Now, Mr. Secretary, I know you would like to give a 5-minute speech back to me, but I only have a few seconds left, and I do need some information from you. As I said, we have asked and have not gotten. Can you tell me, will you share the text and details with my staff of your agreement with El Salvador and any other similar arrangements, including the funding details that we need to have?
Well, first, I'd like to respond to your 7-minute speech, which is primarily, I disagree like 99% of it. It's just not true. We've done nothing that's illegal. We've been in over 600 briefings to Congress. We've asked questions. We've answered questions repeatedly. We get hundreds of questions a day. We respond them as quickly as possible. And your characterization of the moves that we made
Mr. Secretary, I would just tell you, we are here because we need the information so that we can write our budget and on a bipartisan.
Well, you'll have the information you need to write a budget.
Okay, so will we get the details on the El Salvador arrangement? Yes or no?
Well, which Salvador arrangement?
Your agreement that you've made with them about.
Well, what agreement? The president of El Salvador agreed to take in 250 gangbangers, and we sent them.
Funding details we have not gotten. We need to see what the costs are.
Well, we haven't funded that. We've provided them law enforcement assistance. I know you just claimed that we cut all this law enforcement assistance. We provided El Salvador and other countries law enforcement assistance. They have the right to spend that money any way they wish. But they did us a big favor. They took 250 dangerous, trained out. We didn't deport any U.S. residents. No U.S. residents were reported.
I'm not going to argue with you on that
point. Well, it's not an argument, but don't say we deported U.S. residents, because we didn't. I don't deport anybody.
I'm not asking.
But we didn't deport U.S. residents.
I'm asking you whether we can see the details of the arrangements, including the funding details.
I'm giving you the details. The arrangements are we provide law enforcement funding to El Salvador, among other countries. How they choose to spend that money internally is up to them. But I can tell you.
Can you give me the details on the 200-plus offices you're proposing to
Sure, we've
eliminate?
provided that.
We need that. Can I get your commitment to give us those?
It's part of our reorg.
How about the details and justifications of your proposed rescissions from programs you claim are out of alignment with administration priorities? Are we going to get the details of that, funding priorities?
On rescissions and impoundment and things of this nature, that's obviously an OMB function, and I would talk to them about that in regard to what's going to go on with that money. I can tell you the contracts we canceled. And I can list to you the contracts we canceled and the rationale why, because I went through them myself.
Can you get those to us like today? So
the contracts?
Yes, and the funding arrangements that you've made. That's what I'm asking for.
Funding arrangements with who?
For any of the rescissions, for any of the funding, for any of the multiple congressional directives that you have given out, so that we as an appropriations committee can make our funding decisions.
Sure, you're going to have all that information when you put together a budget.
Thank you. I enjoyed that.
There is a reason Senator Patty Murray is one of the most respected members of the Appropriations Committee. And this hearing is a masterclass in why. She didn't come to argue. She came to state facts. She came to lay out a record. She came to ask her colleagues a simple question. How long are you going to sit here and watch this? The facts are devastating. Within hours of taking office, President Trump halted all foreign aid, not some, all, in flagrant defiance of the Impoundment Control Act, which explicitly forbids the president from refusing to spend money that Congress has appropriated. Secretary Rubio oversaw the implementation of that freeze. He oversaw the chaos, the cruelty, the shuttering of USAID, the locking of employees out of buildings and devices in dangerous corners of the world, the paying of people not to work, the abandoning of partners across the globe, the recalling of staff, leaving more than 600 Americans in limbo. And then, when the freeze prevented payment for services already rendered, services provided by American businesses with funding Congress had already approved, Rubio fought it, all the way to the Supreme Court, and he lost. The nation's highest court told him to pay, and to this day, he hasn't made all the payments. American companies are laying off American workers because the Secretary of State refuses to follow the law. Murray lists the losses. Just yesterday, a court ruled against Rubio over his illegal replacement of U.S. Institute of Peace leadership. Other cases over international broadcasting. A pattern of disregard for the law, for the Constitution, for the separation of powers. Then there's the transparency issue, or rather, the lack of it. Hundreds of unanswered congressional requests, briefing requests ignored, emails unanswered. A reorganization plan for the State Department that proposed eliminating 270 offices but provided no information on which offices, no information on layoffs, no information on how USAID would be merged. Murray is not asking for anything complicated. She's asking for basic information so that the Appropriations Committee can do its job, write a budget, fund the government, provide oversight, and Rubio's response is to claim they've done over 600 briefings, to say they get hundreds of questions a day and respond as quickly as possible. But Murray isn't asking about briefings. She's asking about specific requests, specific documents, specific information that has not been provided. And when she presses, Rubio's answers become evasive. The El Salvador arrangement. He says the president of El Salvador agreed to take 250 gangbangers. Murray asks for funding details. Rubio says they haven't funded that. They've provided law enforcement assistance. El Salvador can spend that money any way they wish. He denies deporting U.S. residents, a point Murray never made. She asked for the details of the arrangement, the costs, the funding, not whether U.S. residents were deported. The 200-plus offices being eliminated? Rubio says they provided that. Murray asks for a commitment to give it to the committee. Rubio pivots to OMB. Rescissions and impoundment are an OMB function. He can list canceled contracts. He can provide the rationale. But the funding arrangements, the details Murray actually needs to do her job? You'll have all that information when you put together a budget. That's not an answer. That's a delay. That's a dismissal. That's the executive branch telling Congress to mind its own business. Murray ends with a sarcastic, "I enjoyed it." She didn't enjoy it. She's furious. And she has every right to be. Because what Rubio is doing, what this administration is doing, is not governance. It's sabotage. It's the deliberate dismantling of institutions that have taken decades to build. It's the abandonment of allies, the ceding of global leadership to China, the waste of food assistance that could feed starving people. It's the impoundment of billions of dollars that Congress appropriated. It's the violation of laws that were passed to prevent exactly this kind of executive overreach. And it's happening while the Secretary of State sits in a hearing room and claims nothing is illegal. Murray's question to her colleagues is the most important one asked all day. How long are we going to sit here and watch this silently? Because the clock is ticking. The food in Dubai is expiring in July. The American workers are being laid off. The global leadership is evaporating. And the constitutional power of the purse, the most fundamental check that Congress has on the executive branch, is being trampled. Murray is not asking for a fight. She's asking for the committee to do its job, to assert its authority, to demand the information it needs, to hold the administration accountable. Whether her colleagues on both sides of the aisle will join her remains to be seen. But she has laid out the case, she has stated the facts, she has made the argument, and now the choice is theirs.